Hi,
Is that you?
I am
Ah,
checking to make sure it's working.
all right. Um,
Somebody gotta do it. Might as well be me, right?
yeah, I've just been getting my Unity settings set better. I had to switch over to my laptop today, so it's gonna be a little. We're still in the middle of that switch.
Uh,
So we
oh
are
yeah,
live, it looks like.
are we?
Yep.
Well.
All right.
Well, that reminds me. I've got to. I've been looking in to see if I can um get a better keyboard because this one doesn't seem to be cutting it anymore.
I have a. What was it? I have an HP one that was like 80 bucks
Hmm.
that I don't use anymore. I got it that last year when my computer went out.
Uh, yeah,
Because the keyboard broke.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean, what are you gonna do?
yeah,
Yeah, no. But the thing with this one that I've currently got is I have to assume it's just that it's an old Dell keyboard, but it doesn't register more than I think two inputs at the same time,
nice.
which is a bit of a problem if you're me and you slide your keys while you're playing Deep Rock or Helldivers or
Even if you
most other.
just want to use keyboard shortcuts like Control Shift S, Control Shift Z,
Yeah,
Control
like
Alt Delete.
the shortcuts work, which is the weird bit, but
Oh,
it's like I I don't understand what it is, but must be something. So I've
maybe
been.
you need to get keyboard drivers too.
I think just about the only thing I didn't install as far as drivers go that I don't have to replace is like Bluetooth drivers.
Oh, that's
Just
too bad.
about. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I've been looking into. Oh, there's this thing called switches and linear. What's it's in red and brown, and finally I understand why my keys were so loud. Blue. And yeah.
Yeah, I never
Mm.
checked my switches all that much. I probably should have, but both of them were on sale and needed a keyboard.
Mm.
So I just went with something that was mechanical that felt nice because they had boards out on the one thing on the display.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Okay, looks like it's almost 6 now, so I'll go ahead and
Gross.
do the read
Think
in
it.
and then we can start with Blender.
Okay.
All right, so for any viewers, hello and welcome to Bug Free Productions. Remember to like and subscribe and comment any questions you have. We do Code Tuesday at 6 p.m. and we do Thursday of variable content. Today is Blender. So we'll have the Blender stream today, and we have Saturday, which is usually art, but it is in fact going to be a wrap up and some game art this week. It's going to be finishing off and reviewing that series of the Brick Breaker tutorial. So today here we have Grady back from his PC building video. Is this from
Um,
your PC or from your laptop, Grady?
this is from the PC that we built. Go check out the VOD, guys.
Awesome. So it does make shapes.
It does. It does, as you'll see shortly. It does, in fact, make shapes.
Okay. With that, I think I'm going to turn off the uh, text here and then we can get going.
Alrighty.
All right. And you are good to go, Grady. Ready when you are.
I am ready. What are we gonna do first?
I thought we'd do some ramps and then we'd see from there where to go. Um, just do
Uh,
some like basic 3D type stuff and do some more scene building or
mhm.
platform building, less characters around shapes.
Yeah, I gotcha. So, for those of you who do not use Blender or don't understand Blender very well, you might learn a thing or two, but I am no expert by any means. I just happen to know a few things. So, for instance, one handy thing you might not know is if you press the grave key or that key that's above tab on your keyboard, usually, you'll get this handy dandy little pop-up here, which if you have a shape selected, as you can see, I have the cube selected. It's highlighted in that orange outline right there. For instance, say I want to view this from the bottom for some reason. You have a quick, easy way to view that, or from the front, from the top, from the right, from the left, and so on and so forth. And in case you're wondering how I'm just sort of orbiting the cube like this, I am holding down the middle mouse button. And if you just notice that, when your mouse reaches the boundary of the viewing area, it will go to the other side if you're doing some sort of operation like this. Right. So there's a few other things here, but we're not going to be concerned with the light for now. The camera we will visit later, but we can just leave that be for the moment. Right now we'll look at this cube. Now we're wanting to make a ramp. There's a few ways to do that, but I think what I'll show you is first hitting tab enters edit mode. You can see right here that we've entered, and tabbing again will put you back in object mode. Easier for selecting things or viewing uh, more concretely how it looks. So first thing we can do here is we have a bunch of options here, some of which you might find useful, some of which you might not find quite so useful. But if we come up here, we can select the different grab points for when we're looking at our object, our cube here, to edit. So right here is the vertex selection mode. So it will let you select specific points right there, those nodes. You can even select multiple points by holding shift. And you can also select the edges of the shape in much the same sort of way. And the faces. Now, what I'm going to try is we'll try extruding this region, this face, and wouldn't you know it, we can stretch that pretty far out as however far we want. It should also be mentioned that while I have this face selected, if I use that grave key from earlier and I use this, I can view selected, and that'll jump me right over to focus on this face that we have selected here. Now, I'm going to switch back to selecting just the edges, and we're going to take a look at this bevel tool, and you'll notice as we click right there, Control Z, undo, very easy. But since we have that edge selected and we drag down with our bevel tool, you'll notice it just shears that right off. Now, there are two edges right here, so in some cases this might not be quite the approach you want to take, but this is certainly an option. Just really quick, easy way to, smooth out an edge. And just like that, we have a little bit of a ramp and then a platform at the end of the ramp, should we need it. Following so far, Isaac?
Yep, all looks good. Uh, I always get worried about leaving the like you mentioned, two edges on that one corner.
Yep.
Is there
Yep.
a way? Do you know of a good way to dissolve those?
You can, um, by selecting one edge and then deleting it, I think with X, if memory serves, is the way you normally do that. So if I just X delete vertices, edges, faces, or something, or you can dissolve. Um, so if I just bevel that edge again, and then we select um, just this edge, hit X. Let's see what dissolve edges does right there for us. That removes, I think, one edge. Gonna check. Yep. Okay, so it did. And you're probably wondering, how am I doing this? This seems a little weird. Well, if you press G, G is the grab key, so you can manually pull out faces. And you'll see right now it's moving along the y-axis. You can always tell which axis it is by looking right up here. But right now, I just pressed the middle mouse button. And so doing that will switch the middle, or which axis you are currently moving that thing you grabbed along. You can also do this by, for instance, pressing the individual keys, so X, Y, Z, which is, kind of useful thing that you might want to know. And yeah, so thing to keep in mind about that. Now, what do you think, Isaac? Do you think we should make this a little bit more details? What would you like here, you think? What do you think we could add?
I think the kind of like some sunken faces looks kind of nice, especially when you put
Well,
like a metallic texture over it later, maybe.
yeah, like a crate or something. Yeah, yeah. So, actually, a really easy way to do that in Blender is you can use this inset faces feature. But before we do that, we're going to have to be careful on what we select. So let's try it with the front of this cube here. Remember that grave key, view selected. Now let's try this inset faces tool we've got here. Now you'll notice it goes in just a little bit, which is a little bit, but I think that's really all we need. Don't want to go too far with it. We can, if we want to, even add an extra sunken face, just like that. And really all this is doing for us is it's creating these automatic edges and points for us to use. So if, for instance, then we can say if we want to extrude this region, or we can do this, and we can push it in along that axis there. But I don't want this to extrude this direction, and I want all of these faces, well, maybe not the middle one, but I want all of these faces to go into this shape we've made. Now, keep in mind the edges to this still exist on the inside of the shape. So if I were to push this too far back, you would see it come out the other side, in which case you wouldn't want to just use this tool, you would want to finesse it a little bit uh, to create that sort of illusion of inset space. um,
Now, while
which
you're
is
looking at that, is that so you made the inset faces, and
mhm.
then so are those new faces, or did those faces
Those
it
are
might be kind
create.
of hard to explain. When
Yeah,
you
no, no, no,
that's
makes
created when
sense.
you sync those other faces in, those internal
Yes.
faces, they're not there before.
So let me just back up. So when we did this inset faces, all it's doing here is creating the lines you see and the points they connect to. There's nothing inside the shape at this point, right? But when we use this extrude region tool, when we pull along in any direction, it will start creating these faces here along the direction that you travel. So for instance, if we go in here, you'll see there's nothing right behind these faces around this cube. It's simply empty space because it only creates those faces in the direction of travel. So if we were to do this in the opposite direction, you can see, yep, that's also true. And if we navigate into the shape here, you can see, yep, faces exist here, but nothing else does. So not too bad, I think, but adds just a little bit of texture and dimensionality to your cube here. Just real basic, nothing too crazy. But then, what if we wanted to add a little bit to these other sides too? Well, shall we give this a go? Let's see, I've selected both faces on both sides. What do you think will happen? If you guessed, they will inset at the exact same rate. You would be correct. So ordinarily, if you're going to do something like this to a box or a crate, you'll probably want to have all of the faces selected at the same time so that they're uniform when you do adjust them. Like right here, you can see it's not the same, but I don't mind. Uh, so we're going to leave that as is. And you might want to do that intentionally to leave out some space. But then since I still have these faces selected, I'll inset the faces once more to give myself these little panels on the side. Then we'll select again. The shortcut for that, by the way, is W to get to your select key. And so then we're going to look over here and grab our extrude region again. And, we can pop this out a little bit extra if we want, or not, but let's see. You'll notice because I have these faces selected like this, when I travel along the axis that they're related to, they'll not extrude on both sides. Uh, I remember there being a way to do that. Unfortunately, I can't remember what it is. So,
I think it was
I,
probably something to do with one of the mirror modifiers that I
yep, yeah, I can't quite remember. But uh, even if you're not too sure, you can, if we just select one of these, you can measure the distance. Also, holding shift will slow your speed at movement for transformations like this. And if you hold control, you will jump the increment distance, which you can see right up here in this upper left corner. The default is 1 meter, is the snap to distance for that. So, you know, you can use that to sort of measure just how far you want things to go. and I think we'll probably just a little bit there on that side, and then thin this out just a little on this side. And we could even inset these a little bit if we wanted. I think moving two of the faces in, not a bad idea. And moving these in deeper can also work, but I think we'll just leave it like this. And you'll notice there's a little bit of funny business going on right here because of when we moved those initial edges. So if we push this back, you can see that there's these edges here from when we extruded this face, which is causing there to be additional faces here to compensate for the missing components. Just inset those, and voila, we have a little bit of something on the sides. And you can use these tools to achieve a wide variety of results. Uh, I've had quite a bit of fun with it just because, I'll think of, oh, how can I do that thing? And then I like take the bevel tool and I will all of a sudden be able to figure out exactly how I want that shape to look. So you can even just bevel the edge right off that face and have it look like that, which is kind of fun. All right, let's take a look at this. Remember that key W gets you select, and then we can select our different pieces here. And if we, I believe it is Control Shift.
Oh, that's
No,
what it is. Your geometric shapes and stuff on the front kind of remind me of one of there's a game, uh, The Dungeon Beneath, and the symbol they use for gold is like a square and a square. It's really reminding me of that.
I didn't realize. See, if I can't remember what this is, Isaac's going to have to help me and look it up. But I think it's Control Shift R, but it doesn't seem to be the right key combination.
What's the command you're going for?
Uh, it should be creating additional vertices, um, giving me like increased amount of them as I scroll. Trying to think of what it is. I thought, oh, I sure hope I remember this. Sure enough, I've forgotten what it was. It is.
If you can't remember it, you can always use the slice tool and then just delete or dissolve the edge, which is what I usually did.
No, that's not it. Darn. Shift Control R maybe? Aha! Control R. It wasn't shift. It wasn't Shift Control. It was just Control R. So I'll just show you how I did that again. Um, you don't even really need much selected for this. But as you can see, right after you press Control R, uh, if you go to one of the sides of your shape, you'll be able to see these little outlines that it makes for you in yellow. And if you scroll upward, you can. Did you hear that?
I don't think so. I think you cut out for a second.
Okay, good. I sneezed. Anyway,
It peaked.
uh, Yeah, it did great. Anyway, after you hit Control R, you can scroll up on your mouse wheel. And by the way, if you don't have a mouse yet for Blender, I would absolutely recommend it. There's just a lot of ease of use you get out of it rather than just a touchpad. Um,
And if you
but
have
yeah, you
more
can.
than one device you work on, have more than one mouse, because I'm doing that right now where I'm plugging in my USB mice every time and mouse and keyboard combination. It's not fun. It's nice just to have separate extra mice and stuff.
Yeah, always have spares for everything and backups. Always. General life lesson doesn't just apply to Blender or coding or, well, anything, but, you know. So then you can left click and it will give you the option to move these new edges along inside this face and around your shape. And so if I wanted them offset to the side like this, I could do that. Or if I wanted them balanced, I just wouldn't move my mouse right after I had pressed the left click. Because then I wouldn't be in the state where I'm like, where's the center? I don't know. And right there, I just pressed right click, which I guess snaps it to the centermost point, which is kind of nice. And you can also do this in the other direction too on your faces. So we can do this. And if you look on the bottom, you can see some recommendations for things you might want to do with your current selected tool. So I'll just press right click again. And, there you can see it's created a bunch of extra edges and vertices along the sides, giving us more options if we wanted to just simply uh, either inset some of these faces, maybe pull some out, push some in. You know, you got some options there.
And that's the same as the loop cut tool, correct?
I
It looks
think
very similar.
it might actually just be the loop cut tool. Yeah, no, that is the loop cut tool. I had forgotten the name of it. Thank you, Isaac.
It was one of my very favorite tools when I was trying to learn character uh, construction with Blender.
I can bet because I mean that's just very easily nice to have more faces on command like this. Anyway, so now that we've got this, I'm feeling like a bit of a ramp needs a little bit of a rail or an edge on the sides. What do you think, Isaac?
That sounds good. You always gotta have something to ride the skateboard down.
Yeah, yep. So, you know, oh, look this. We're still in selecting our vertices. Tisk tisk, that won't do. No, no. We want either edge or face for this one. The face will make it easier for this next part. And remember to select multiple faces at the same time. Just hold down shift. Uh, Holding down shift usually lets you select multiple things in other programs and on websites and things. Useful little bit of knowledge there for you. And I don't know. What do you think? I'm feeling like maybe going. I feel like this is too far. So, what if we shrink it down just a little bit?
That's looking pretty good. Maybe a little less. Just like, yeah, like train
There,
tracks.
yeah, or bricks or something. I know I've pressed right click. Gonna have to adjust that again. There we go. And voila, we have a little bit of an edge on
Um,
our ramp here. Hmm?
while you're on those rails, is there a way to quickly merge the faces, like dissolving those edges, or would that
I
be
believe
difficult?
so. Let me see. I think we can just X dissolve and then that kind of, yep. Okay.
Nice.
Let me zoom in there to make sure that yep, okay. So it did indeed, right. So when you press X, it gives you options for deleting. And when it says dissolve, it doesn't exactly mean delete. It more means I don't want whatever I have selected. Could you please merge it with the rest of the things so that it still remains a shape and isn't missing a face? But if you, for instance, did in fact want there to be a hole in your box, you could, after selecting, you know, some amount of faces, press X, you can say delete faces, and then you would have a hole in the side of your box. Usually this is not the sort of thing you want to do intentionally, but it is definitely an option, so please keep that in mind.
Oh, didn't it seal off the sides though when you did that? Or did
Nope,
it leave them
because
open?
it left that out. So if I do that again, you can see now we can see, well, actually, if I refocus view selected on these and I press X and I delete faces, I can see clear through to the other side where, the other side of my box is. But typically, this is not something you want anyone to see because it's, well, not typically done intentionally. Uh, Usually, this is the sort of thing you would only see if you were inside the object through glitches or entity artifacts or something of that sort,
Or camera placement?
or camera placement.
I
Yes, we
know
do
I
love camera
I know
placement.
I heard a thing about a lot of uh, camera handlers in Unity. They're like it's the biggest bane of a camera handler to try and make sure it's not clipping inside an object.
Hmm, neat. Well, while he's talking, I'm just going to keep dissolving the faces on the side of this so you can see it. And also, sometimes if you have extra faces like this and they don't necessarily warrant extra attention or detail, you can choose to dissolve them just to clean it up a bit, get a few less bits of geometry at the end. You know, not too much, but something to think about. And so then I will merge and dissolve these. The faces are similar because you wouldn't want them to be dissimilar, probably. And yeah, so just like that, we've got a little bit of some rails on our little ramp on our box here. Now then, let's say we give this ramp just a little bit of texture without actually giving it any pixels. First
That
thing we're
sounds
going to want
good.
to do. Yeah. First thing we can do for this is, well, let's just pick a few faces. It doesn't matter which ones. We're just sort of picking random ones.
There's no random in computers, Grady.
Oh, there's plenty random. Just ask me when I've sat too long somewhere and staring at a screen. Anyway, the thing we're gonna want to do for this, just to add a little bit of texture is, well, first of all, this doesn't really look very nice, so let's refocus on that. That's much better, I think. And, don't be afraid to play around with this because, if I want to, I could press G and whoa, look at that unexpected result. unexpected, but it actually doesn't look too bad. Hmm,
It looks like
yeah,
really old roof shingles. They're just
yep,
going up and down all over.
yep, and you can tell there's something wrong with these shapes because right here, if you notice, this doesn't have any edges going across it. And yet, when I look across the face like this, you can see there's very clearly an edge there, but it's not marked. Now, you can manually fix these edges by selecting specific vertices and then I think it's right click and then new edge or face from vertices and it will connect right there. But as you can see, it didn't actually fill right there, which is a problem. Which I think we have to do something with, but I am losing my mind and can't quite remember exactly how this is fixed. As you can see, those 2 points are definitely connected, but there's no actual space between them.
Is it maybe the using a dissolve in a certain place so that the next face is connecting those other two vertices?
Hmm, possibly. Let's connect this. And then, X. Dissolve face. Okay. What about dissolve edge? That did the opposite of what we want. Let's try this. Subdivide. That's somehow more confusing, which is not quite what we want because we still have that problem of, well, it's not quite so clear anymore, but we definitely still have that problem with this face at the very least, where I guess instead of there being an edge going across, it's still right up that alley, which is a bit of a problem if you want clean meshes. So, investigate, shall we? What can we do here to figure this out? Maybe we could also just leave it and whatnot. But for specific texturing, you will want to be aware of this sort of detail because if you go to try to apply a texture to something, um, it will warp the texture you put it on. Now, if we're just doing this in, simple colors, they don't need to be super detailed, that's fine. Really easy. No worries. But do keep that in mind as something to watch out for. But getting back to my original point, there we are. Uh, going to adjust these specifically just with the extrude region tool. But another thing before we get too much further along is Blender has a really short memory, shorter than Isaac's sometimes. But, you know,
Hey,
uh,
mine is much
yeah,
shorter.
you might be right. So, if ever you are thinking, I really want to try a bunch of deviations or derivatives of this idea, then we can hit tab, exit edit mode, copy this, paste it, and then you'll notice over here cube 001. And so if we press G, which is our grab key, remember, we can drag this copy or this clone right off into the side and sort of store it as a restore point functionally. And that way, if, say, I run out of memory for Blender's clipboard of changes that I can go back and undo, then I still have a copy of that original object. So don't be afraid to make copies of things. I had a field of copies of shapes and models when I was working on some of the stuff Isaac's got going at the moment.
Yeah,
And
I remember the Battle Tops one you had, especially when it came to doing the attack ring type ones. It was like we got anywhere from 5 to 10 different copies just trying to test stuff out.
yeah, so don't be afraid to make copies. You will thank yourself later. Trust me. So
Um,
for
I
this,
think it was a big thing like when you were going for scale and you had to like, how do I make all these consistent? Well, they kind of have to be in one file so that I can compare them to the other things I have.
yep, yep. Also, for those of you who are in fact doing Unity stuff, as I'm pretty sure that's what Isaac's teaching you a little bit of things that would be handy in Unity. You will be relieved to know that the scale is the same in Blender as it is in Unity. So one is one, and you don't need to really think about it too hard. I did for Battletops just because the scale I was supposed to model at was extremely small. It's not full 1 meter. It was so small, Blender almost couldn't tell me what was on the inside of the object, which was an interesting experience.
Yeah, because we had to model at 0.03 units and actually smaller than that. So when we pulled in your tops, I think were they at 1 or something, and then we scaled them down
Yep. Yeah.
um, as Unity objects, and then they displayed fine, but you couldn't pull them in as small Blender files, which was kind of weird.
And given, like I said, I'm not an expert at Blender, I just happen to know a few things specifically from Battletops, my experience with that. Um, I never quite found a great way to add texture detail when I was adding colors to the objects and things. And I think the main reason for that is because, well, firstly, these objects are literally the size of actual tops. So, factor one. But then factor two is I wasn't doing anything specific to increase the uh, detail of the image or the space that it had on the models. So keep that in mind. You know, just helpful little things might help at some point, I hope. So I don't like the way that this is contacting the bottom like so. So we're just going to bevel or control B, I guess is also a way to do it. Uh, we're going to do this. And then we're going to select that edge again, press X, dissolve edge. There we go. Got rid of our extra edge there at the bottom. And then we're going to do the same thing here at the top because this doesn't quite look right either to me. So remember pressing W gets you your select and X, dissolve edges. Ta-da! Just a little bit of texture. Now, if we want to see what that looks like outside of edit mode, because once you actually put texture on this, it's not going to have all of these nice little black lines to indicate where the edges of the faces are. You can see, okay, it's not incredibly detailed, but there is a bit of dimensionality to it, sort of like bricks along a path, maybe.
To me, it's kind of giving Blinko, like the where you drop the hockey puck down and it goes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so always remember to look at that before and after. And, obviously, this isn't perhaps the best representation of what the shape is going to end up as, because we've not added any color, we've not added in shading, shadows, nothing. You have almost no idea other than the base form what this looks like. And a bit of color can do quite a bit of work, I assure you. So now that we've got that, let's maybe add in a little bit more of these, except maybe going down. Huh? What do you say to that?
Mhm. That sounds fun. It's going down, down in an early round.
This guy thinks he's funny. Because he is! Ladies and gentlemen, Isaac. Just for my own sanity's sake, I'm not going to try to inset any of the ones on the very bottom because then they would start to clip through the bottom of the object. And I do not want that at all in the slightest. So,
If you were to do that and you deleted the or dissolved the edge that poked through, would it fix the problem or just have a different problem?
I don't know. Let's find out. So, you can see very egregiously that these two are poking right through, just being absolutely menacing. And so if we select, well, let's do the one side for now and refocus on that view. So just so we don't have to really struggle to see and find these faces. And you'll see on the inside of the object, yep, there it is. And if we look over top, you'll see it actually runs into that right there. So looks like we won't be able to actually just solve that, but let's give it a shot. See what happens. Dissolve faces. Nope.
Made it flat
Okay,
again.
made it flat again. So let's try dissolving edges. Different result. It adds the range of this vertex here. And what happens if we dissolve vertices? We get an even bigger AoE. Not so good, not so good. But what if limited dissolve? What does that do? It would seem that it didn't do anything in this case.
Yeah, we must not have a selection that can do anything with.
No. But what we can do is press Control Z really quickly and hope it comes back. Because I think I went over the limit of these. No, I
Ooh,
didn't. Oh, control, ladies
I
and
was
gentlemen.
almost certain we were dragging over another copy.
Nope. And that is, yeah, that's why we have this over here, is in case I screw something up real bad and we need to go back that far. But
Delete
you
from
know, this is,
hierarchy.
yeah, this is not a bad time at all for me to quickly control, paste, grab, and put that copy over there. Because I am rightfully so paranoid that that will not end up well for me. So, let's see. And, you know, at a certain point, you will probably get a hold of these shortcuts, shift spacebar, and I think I pressed something else, but then it gives you a quick display of all of these, but just gonna press or just gonna press E for that extruding edge, and we're not going to do whatever it just did, and we're going to actually inset those faces. And now, if we take a look at that, has even more texture, and you can see that with the side-by-side comparison of this one here. And if I grab that and I with G and I press X, I can move that along a little bit closer. You can see the differences right there.
I'm
very
just
clear.
gonna.
Yep.
I was just gonna say that one thing that's interesting about this in game design is that you can do the you can have the shape with a lot of texture and lighting, and then put a very flat plane over top of it so that it doesn't affect like mechanics and stuff, but it still looks like you get all the benefits of having that texture to the model.
Yes. Yes. Very important. You wouldn't want your player character to get stuck on one of these. That would be bad. That
That's
would be
like
very
a
bad.
Call of Duty level uh design right
Ooh,
there, getting caught on all the bricks.
ooh, say it ain't so, Susan. Say it ain't so. But yeah, I think that's enough detail right there. So I am going to, well, you're never going to see the bottom, assumedly. I mean, you might, but for our purposes, I am designing this in the mind that the player is probably going to run up this, walk around it, but not under it. So I don't need to add any texture at the bottom.
You could always create a separate object if you needed that later too, right? You could always just not necessarily a copy that is this, but with the texture underneath, but just a small object that has texture to put underneath it.
Yeah, you can always do that. Um, but never add anything you don't have to because if you do too much, you will start to chug and it will be painful. So beware, all ye who enter here.
Yeah, I think
Beware.
I remember somebody was trying to run Blender on 8 gigs of RAM. I don't think you can really, or at least I don't recommend running on anything that's not a minimum of, what is it? What, 16 probably? Even 12's kind of small for it because I was running on a 12 gig machine and it needed more RAM. It needs like a full 16 to run. I
Well, this
don't
is
know what
a
yours had when you did it on your laptop, but
yeah. I think it was 16. I'm pretty sure. I don't think that was 8. No, it definitely wasn't. Definitely 16.
when I first got my first laptop, it only had 12 gigs of RAM in it, and it ran really good, and up until the point where it's like, I think it was Skyrim, because it didn't have the power it needed, because you couldn't just throw RAM at Skyrim. It only ran on 4 gigs, no matter what you did, unless you like modded it, but stuff like that. And it couldn't handle Blender either. It was like, no, this is too big, too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
There's too much. Too much. End of story. No thanks.
But yeah, I think anything having 16 gigs nowadays should run it really easily.
Mm.
Unless you're doing animation, which I don't think you've touched yet, but when you do animation type things, you'll need possibly even a really beefy graphics card to run it.
Yeah. Just remember, if you can't run it on your machine, you have one of two problems. One, you need to turn as many of your faces into less faces as possible. Or two, close all of your Chrome tabs. Good grief and gravy. Close your Chrome tabs. Don't leave those open. I knew somebody who had, how many did he say? 96 tabs open? I don't know how his computer was still running. It wasn't high end or anything. It was just this dinky little thing he had since like 2006 or something. How in the First of all, how are you running anything on that much less Chrome and its many tabs? Good grief.
Yeah, I don't think that's something I've ever really dealt with. Um, I usually keep all my browsers either closed or pretty low on tabs, because I just set up the home page to go directly to all my stuff. So it opens the four I use all the time, and then everything else is, well, it doesn't need to be open.
So, Isaac, what do you think? Should we do something else with this, or what do you think?
Um, that's looking pretty good. We're approaching, what is it, 7 o'clock? So if you wanna work on this for a little bit longer, we can. Otherwise, we could do like some more scenery objects, like maybe some pillars that kind of match this aesthetic or something.
Can do some pillars, that works. So, we will just get out of edit mode, and
One question though is, so that cube is still separate from the, no, that's an extrusion.
yep, it's an extrusion, which means it's part of the object.
Could you make a copy and then cut off? I guess you'd get a new face on a cube, but like, could you
Yeah,
cube off an end and use that
I
on
think
part
so.
of the pillar?
Um, was it really my friend? But we can give it a shot. Copy, paste, grab, X, and view selected. Edit mode with tab, and then I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a neat trick. Now, you've probably been wondering, what are all these things up here in this corner for? Uh, I will answer at least one of those things. Right here, we have the different view options for the material we have selected. We can also X-ray right through all our materials, which lets us see which edges are on the opposite side. And this is useful for a few reasons. One, so you can see what's back there. You can also select through objects, which you might find useful. For instance, if I wanted to select all of these, I can really easily. But what we're currently going to be doing is we're going to try and adjust this now. What I just did is I held shift and pushed down on my mouse wheel. That lets you sort of move around on that plane that you're currently facing. It works if you're not facing a standard direction also. But with X-ray enabled, we're just going to look at that and we're like, well, we've selected a lot of edges. Let's select faces instead. See how that works. Much better, I think. We missed, I think, just a few. Try that one more time. All right, we've got all this selected. Now what happens if we dissolve faces? Not much happens. Not much at all happens. So instead what we will do is we will exit X-ray mode and we will delete faces. And you'll notice this was forgotten. So I also need to delete that face, which is very, very important. Now, one other thing you'll notice is there's this orange point right here in the middle. That is where the center of the object is counted. I believe there's a way to change that, but I cannot quite remember how. Because if I look at this from the top, if I zoom it, when I rotate it, you'll see that's the axis or the point where it rotates. Rotate is just R. Makes sense. Easy to remember for the most part. But
I know in some programs it was like Shift or Control R, and I could never get used to that because every other program, like Blender and Photoshop, it was just R.
yep. But since I don't like having this side open, that seems like a poor decision to me personally. So we're going to select this edge here. All these many places. And this is
Not
also
to
why
cut in, but couldn't you also use the X-ray mode and select all the back vertices?
you could, but I'm not positive I wouldn't grab other things, which is why I'm doing this. But you are correct. You could do that. In fact, you probably should. I kind of did just waste my own time there. But if we dissolve edges, no, that's not what we want to do. What if we dissolve faces? No, that's
I
not
don't think
fixing our
it's a dissolve. I think it's a like create face or something like that.
Oh, yeah, right click. Or actually F. Yes. So F is the hotkey for a new face from edges or from selected area. And you'll notice we've got this little bit of a straggler poking out here. Don't want that, so we're going to shift spacebar, just use our cheat sheet here, control B bevel, and we're gonna pull
Hmm.
that in just a bit. So that sort of mirrors the same operation we have going right here. And W for our select, and we will X, dissolve edge. There we go. Now this is, well, we've separated it from the box section, which is, I think, what you were looking for.
I was actually trying to refer to the opposite where you kept the box and didn't include the
Oh,
ramp.
no, no. Well, we'll just have to do the same thing again, won't we? Which is fine, just as soon as I get out of edit mode.
I'm looking at that and that kind of has like that brick looking type thing, which could also give you kind of a shingle effect. So you could put two of those together and make a roof,
You could, you
like
could.
a
This
peak.
is what we call reusing assets. You will encounter more ideas for the stuff you've made than the stuff you haven't. Trust me.
Could we coin the phrase the Lego approach?
You know that I don't know. That might be trademarked already.
Uh,
What a shame. What a shame. Then enable X-ray and delete.
did you hear about the massive like cease and desist or
No, I
yeah.
have no idea.
Um Nintendo, Sega, and Lego all like on all the emulation sites where you got ISOs, they sent a letter asking them to take them offline.
Oh, I did hear about that. Yeah,
So they still
yeah,
store them, but they can't let people download them.
yeah. Which is just a real kick in the seat of the pants, and
I mean, it's fine. At least in Nintendo's case, because they made their virtual console, so they at least intend on supporting it, which I guess is fine. Um, my thing comes in more like Sega and Lego, where they don't support the game anymore, and it's you can't get hardware for it either anymore. So it's just kind of like that stuff's like why bother? But
yeah. No, that actually reminds me of uh, this little thing you might not have heard about, but is currently making the rounds. It's called Stop Killing Games. Uh, little EU initiative thing. Forget who started it, but the essential premise is, hey, if you're not going to upkeep the servers or what have you for a game that you've made, uh, just don't stop us from doing that for you when you decide to remove it from availability or something. Because there's a lot of games where you can't actually go and play it anymore because they've taken the servers down, which means they've essentially removed your purchase of that item, which is something that I guess the EU has historically been very upset about with other things. So I think, for instance, there's what is it, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 or something. Um, I remember watching something by someone, and they mentioned, yeah, they only ever put the first level on the hard disk. So
Oh no.
if you if you ever try to play it fresh on a different console from the disk, you can't actually play the rest of the game because they only had enough time to put the first level and a bit of code that connected to one of their servers and downloaded the rest of the game for you. But they've since taken that server offline, and so you can't actually play the full thing if you're not essentially pirating it because they don't offer it anymore, or you already have it on hardware somewhere. So, fun little knowledge right there. And I just cloned that box there. So now we have our box. What shall we do with it? I don't know. That's what I'm not here for. Isaac's here. He's the idea guy. Let's ask him. Isaac, what are we doing with this?
Oh, I was just thinking like we could probably use that for like the top of a column or something, like a decorative top, and then make some new kind of pillar, pillar section in between them, or in between the two cubes.
Okay, so let me clone this again and map that. Well, maybe this direction is more apt, and we'll just move it over there. And it's today, and
This is
you know,
Blender. Every direction is at.
isn't that true? Isn't that true? But yeah, see, this is where making all of the sides the same probably would have helped me now, but I didn't do that. So we will. Hmm, I think we'll just leave that be, and we will make these the tops of columns. You said.
Yeah, the top and bottom do like a symmetrical-ish thing.
All right.
We now have, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we have all the pieces to make an arch. Because you put two of the ramps together to make the top of the arch, and then we make the columns.
We do indeed, and so I am going to do this, and then let's take a look at that. Wow, look at that. Grabbing stuff in Blender. Isn't that neat? So I'm going to refocus on our four main points here. And then, well, you know, if these are going to be columns and we're going to have maybe an arch or something, it would probably help if I had something to connect the top and bottom of the pillar. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create a shape. So if you click add up here, you can choose a whole bunch of different things that you want to create. But for our purposes, we will just be creating a mesh. I think a cylinder, maybe. Yeah, that sounds about right. And it will create the object at wherever this 3D cursor location is. By default, that's at 00 world global, but I moved it earlier by accident. So It's over here now. And then if you notice this little add cylinder drop down menu, it actually expands, and then we can change a few things about it, such as, oh, I don't know, number of vertices. Maybe we want it to be a bit more blocky, and we'll just view selected so you can see that bit easier. But oh no, oh no, I haven't gotten it the way I wanted. No, what are we gonna do? We can just make another one right after I move the 3D cursor right here, so it's easier to, well, look at the next one. Make. I'll just delete that one. I'll go add, mesh, cylinder, easy stuff. View selected, just like that. And we can adjust the vertices. And remember, holding shift will slow down your speedster tendencies just a bit. I'm a fan of Roman pillars just because those are very pillar shaped in my mind, but you may disagree and you may think, well, I'm actually a fan of different architecture and I like triangles and squares and diamonds and things. You know, that's up to you. I think you're wrong, obviously, but you know, that's up to you. You might need a different shape for
Might also
whatever
need
project.
less faces or something too if they're working on that.
Exactly. And so you can also just type in values here by left clicking. Uh,
That's
but
my favorite method.
that is your favorite method. That's why we disagree. But um, you can also remember use control to hold control to snap to the next increment value, which in this case is just going up a meter. And I feel like those are too tall. So let's look out. And is that tall enough? I'm gonna say no.
Looks
And
close.
looks close, but it's not quite as tall as I want. So I'm going to increase it just a bit. And I think that's about good, or perhaps too much. Go back. Go back to 9. Yeah. Yeah, that looks a bit more correct. And you know, if you're doing specific things, you can specifically adjust it. But for my purposes, I don't have too much of a preference, so I can afford to be a little bit more easygoing with it. But since this is going to be in the center of the cubes, I'm going to look at the top so I can get a better idea. And you can manually adjust it if you want like this. And then see grab Z, and we can do that to do sort of fitting that way. And you'll notice it's kind of a bit big, so I think if we press S, which is scaling shortcut, we can actually shrink that down just a bit so that it fits inside our cube a bit nicer. You will notice that all three dimensions did shrink when we did that. But a really simple thing we can do is view selected and then we edit mode again. And we select that top face, left, grab, we go Z. That functions as an extension to the base object without actually creating any new vertices or edges or faces or things. So you might find that useful. Um, that looks about right, but I'm not sure it's centered. So what we can do is we can look at this object, this cube that we've modified, and if we go to I believe it's world object. That's it. That's object. Um, if it's somewhere that's not at the 0, 0, 0 coordinate, you can look at this object and you'll see, oh, that orange dot. Yep, that's the center of the object, and that's where these metrics are located. So we can, for instance, just easily copy this and paste easily, and then we can be sure that these values are the same, and therefore that these are aligned properly. You can see the Z wasn't quite there, but it was close enough.
So that's just the position information, just because I have a hard time reading the
Yep,
screen from
it's the
my
position
view.
information on the transform. I believe in Unity you can just copy the positioning transformation just really easily by
Yeah,
literally copying it.
it's
But
right click and you can copy.
yeah, but I don't think there's quite that in Blender, unfortunately. Which is, I think, a real shame because I was so used to that in Unity. Um, and this is functionally just about the same, the 3D dimension sort of environment.
Although
But
I
now
will
that we've,
say in Blender's defense, it did start with a, I'm pretty sure it started with a lock scale proportions
oh,
option,
yeah,
which in Unity wasn't added until like I think 2020, 2021 or 2022.
mm,
So you just had to like freeform object transforms for most of it, or type them in and scale them by hand.
well, I'm just gonna copy that and move it over along that Y axis so we got a nice little shape there. And, it doesn't look too bad, for what it is. Not too bad. We go over here to our silly little ramp object that I made earlier. You see that doesn't look quite right.
Which
And,
part?
well, that part we rotated around earlier, this
Mm,
orange dot, there is a way to fix it if only I could remember how. I feel like it was, oh, it's gotta be something in one of these.
is it an object maybe? That's where your position information was. Does that have
Well,
your
yeah, but that's,
center in there?
no, because that is the center.
Mm. Oh,
So,
that's the position for the center of the object.
yeah, it's literally right there because if you notice, as I get
I
closer to
see.
0, but the actual object is displaced off of that center, which means you have to do some things. Ah, yes. I think there it is. Set origin. That's the name of it. So right clicking and then this opens up a menu. Set origin. You can set geometry to origin, and then tooltips help here. They tell you a lot. Use them. They will help. Um, and if we do that, you'll notice that it has repositioned itself to the mathematical center of the bounds. Now it's not quite maybe where you could want it. Maybe I would want it more towards the actual center of the object. But I'm actually okay with where that is. So I don't mind too much. It's
One thing
certainly,
I'd like to bring up here is probably, like you're mentioning where the center is. So when you pull that into Unity, it looks, or it doesn't look, but it behaves like it pivots around that center point, right? So
yep, it,
if you plan on rotating your objects ahead of time, and know where that rotation point should be, you're going to want to put that in either for whoever's going to be using the asset or whatever. It's a good thing to have set ahead of time. Because there's like a cool one with the bike asset we have, where the fork center position is actually at the end of the fork. So you can rotate the fork around that point, and then it moves the whole like wheels and everything with it, so that we can get some suspension effects.
Yep. So there's always a few options for how to set the origin, but be mindful of that orange dot because that will tell you where it is and what it's doing. Next, we're just gonna grab this and move it up here. And we're going to left because it's not quite centered on point. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, well, where is this? Say, well, we want this to be aligned on the x-axis, so we can just copy that from our other box and paste it here. And just like that, it will snap right over. And now we're on the right axis, but this doesn't quite look right. So we're gonna just adjust this a little bit. And we're going to scale with S, and we're going to make that bigger. And we're going to press G, grab, and press Z to move up. And I usually like to either go a little bit onto my shapes if I'm doing this, or I believe there is a, see, grab. There should be a snap. Oh, wait. No, I know what it is. I think it is here. Yes. Snap during transform. And we can choose what sort of thing we snap to. So if we want to snap this to the very top of this object, I can. Just by selecting this little magnet and then selecting face for the snap. And then this way, we know that there's no space between those two faces. They're right on top of each other. And then we can put this back
Could you show
in
that one
place.
more time?
Yep,
That was
yep.
kind of.
So we say you're assembling your objects, right? And you've got space there. You don't want there to be space there. Instead of just clipping the objects together like that, because, you know, that just isn't quite as professional sometimes. You might want to do that, but options. So what instead we're going to do is we're going to view selected, so we're focused on that object again. And then up here in the top middle of your screen, there should be a little magnet icon, and it should say snap during transform when you hover over it. You want to click that once so it highlights in blue, meaning it's active, and then you open up its little drop down menu here, and you can select to snap to various things or components. Uh, but for our purposes, we're going to select face because we want this to sit right on top of the pillar cube cap. So then we'll just press G to grab. And you'll notice as I move along this pillar, it wants to move that edge that I'm closest um, to fit right alongside whatever face I'm currently on top of with my mouse. So if we move it to the top of this right here, and we look at that, that is absolutely flush with the top of our cube on top of our pillar. And then from there, you can move it around on the axis you want. So we can press Y. Now that we've got it at the correct Z level, we can move it in closer. we can adjust the X value. And since I copied the X value for the center of these cubes earlier, I'm just going to paste that in there in our location X for our transform. And then, ta-da! Would you look at that? It's sitting right up top there, and now you have half of a roof.
That's looking pretty good so far.
Yeah. And then if we just look at the top view here, we go, well, that's nice. But I feel like it's missing something right here specifically. Now there's two things I could do here. One thing I could do is I could copy this image, I could paste it, or not this image, this shape, I could paste it and rotate it 180 degrees and place it right there. Or I could do the considerably easier thing and copy the entire thing, paste it, grab it, and then select Y because that's the axis we're moving along here. And now that I have that right there, we're going to just look at the top. We're going to rotate. And remember, if we hold Control, it snaps. And this is very useful for when you want to turn everything directly around. If we just look at that as it goes, you can see it, since I have everything selected as one, it treats it as one object, not as several, which is something to consider. And then since we have our snapping configured, we can match those faces together still. And then all we need to do is move our pillar here that we copied and give it the X value from earlier. That wasn't the X value from earlier, was it? No, probably not. So we're just going to look at the top and we're going to, well, grab this after turning off our magnet. And then we'll press X and we'll slide that over. Still at the wrong height though. So this time when we press G, we'll press Z and down it goes. And you can do similar things to get those matched up with the exact height you want so that these aren't different in their dimension proportion. We're just gonna move this right on out of here.
I was kind of wondering how you were going to select that later. I'm like,
Nope, nope. We're getting rid of it. It's a copy. It's a surprise tool. It'll help us later. Then we can, well, we can do whatever we want with this. We can look at the top. We can copy paste it. We can grab and we can press X. Move this along. We can create copies of this. Make it sort of a series of pillars and roof sections. Or perhaps you want to do that, but you actually are looking for something a little more, I don't know. Just confirm that that's, yep, so that is currently selected. Grab, press X, we do that, and then we copy that, we paste that, press, oh, we grab, and then we press X, and we move that, and you'll see now we have several copies sitting next to each other, which we can do something fun with, because I can delete these, and that deleted the cube. I want that cube. I don't want to delete it. Then I can actually well, you can do a few things here. Let's try scaling in the X direction. And you can see that scales every component along the axis we're currently traveling towards, which means every part of this will get super wide, which might not be what you want, but you can use this at your own risk. I can stretch this over, and then maybe I get rid of those right after I copy this because you want to have copies of everything you do so that in case you want to make different iterations on the same concept, you don't destroy it later. And just like that, we have created whatever this is.
A very structurally unsound copy.
Come on, what are you talking about? Perfectly structurally sound. Yes, clearly.
There we go.
Yeah, there. Does it look the nicest? Well, I think it doesn't look too bad. Please be nice. My feelings are easily hurt. But yeah, just simple little thing. What say you, Isaac? What's next? What
It's
should
looking
we
pretty
try?
nice. It's almost 7:30, so we should probably look at how do I get my objects out of Blender maybe?
Ah, a good one that. A good one that is indeed. Now, the nice thing I think I should mention here is you can name these if it is it because I'm not in edit mode. Maybe it's because I'm in it. I don't know. I should be able to rename these. There. Oh, it's just double click. There we go. So if you, for instance, wanted to name, I don't know, this particular roof section, you could. And when you have something selected, it will show up in blue on your hierarchy up here. So you can go and you can name these things, make them easier to find later. One last thing I did want to look at quick, um, was the camera, and you can always toggle this to look at it. And when you pull this into Unity, it actually does use the same camera uh, for some reason. So you can keep that in there. But
That's as an
for anything,
open FBX or as a Blender file when you pull it into Unity.
when I've pulled this into Unity, um, it has acted like a Unity camera object, which is interesting, but not necessarily something I wanted at the time. So I usually just delete this. Don't need it. Simple as that.
I
But
think that might be a shader property from Unity's point of view. It's like this is how the object's supposed to be shaded, so it shades it with its own shader in that way. That might be it.
yeah, that might be it. I've got no idea. Not an expert, just a guy who knows a few things. And well, next, you'll always want to make sure you have your files saved. So save the blend file. Um, that will be your sandbox in case you need something from it later. But the next thing you're going to want to do is you will want to go to, I believe it's UV editing. Wait, no, is this for the, no, that's for the, excuse me. That's a different thing. That's maybe a different video that Isaac will show you. Um, what you actually want to do is you'll want to uh, save as, um, and then I don't think you can see this, but um, when you save as, there will be options for you to save as rather than, uh, oh shoot, that's not it. Isaac, what's the file type?
I think it's OpenFBX is the one we want to pull in.
Ah, here it is. No, that's my fault, I think. You actually want to go to export, and then you have a few different varieties. But like he said, FBX, this
Yeah.
will generate your file that will hold the shape data and information for Unity. If you click that, and then you name the file, and then you drop that into your Unity file structure, you will be able to access this and all its contents. Um, but when it says collection up here, that is essentially what it gives you when you export it. Uh, so you get a box in my case with all of these as they appear and as they are in relation to each other. So if I brought this into Unity right now, you would just see all of these in the scene as is. So,
So then how would you get selected objects then? So say we only want like the little roof part, the roof with the pillars.
well, way you can do that is typically what I will do is I'll have a sandbox with all of my objects in it because then I know, how big this top from Battletops was in relation to this other one, or this asset needs to be shorter than this one. Makes it easier that way. For specific assets being exported, I almost always will say I will go and copy the object that I want, and then I will go File, New, and General, and then it'll ask me if I want to save this, and I can say, yeah, save that. And because I had that in my clipboard, I can paste it, and it appears exactly where it was with the dimensions and size that it had beforehand. And uh, then you can just delete these other components that appear here, and then just put this at 0, 0 usually, because you don't want anything to be some far flung off location.
Mm.
And then, file, export, FBX. Drop that into Unity and you're good to go with your basic shape.
So it's kind of similar like to when we separated out scenes for testing the UI versus the one we put together to actually hold the UI
Yep,
in Unity.
yep. It's just a clean way to do that uh, because it helps you separate your objects into things that make it easier to manage.
And then do we need to fuse, like if you go back to that roof area, right, with your sandbox type area?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Where is it? There you go. Yep. Go back
So
to this.
we would just have to grab the collection of objects and put it in there. We wouldn't have to like we wouldn't have to put the different um, faces fused like we did for the ramp and stuff. Is you can you just take like the whole gazebo structure and put that in a new one and it'll act as one object when it's exported?
Nope. You can throw these all into their own file, and so you can have a gazebo or a whatever structure you want. But as you can see here, since I am still contacting multiple selections as far as models go, it will register as specific, like this cube 11, 12 through 20. It does not register as a single object if you
Right.
want to do that.
I'm thinking in terms of export. So if I put these in another like a blank project like you showed before and then exported that, would that count
Nope,
as one object when it comes into Unity or would it count as multiple objects?
it would count as multiple because it packages everything inside of this collection box in Unity or in Blender, it it essentially zips up everything that's in this collection box under scene collection, and it says, "All right, this is the thing you asked for. Here you go." And so you will have, if you copied and you pasted all of these as is into a new file, in Unity, you would be able to, for instance, drag this around because
Okay.
these are not unified into one object; they are several.
Okay, so that's maybe something that they would have to think about if they were doing, say, like something for somebody else versus for their own game. They might have to think about how their objects are fused together then.
Yep. I was just thinking, I know I did that. It's been a while. What was the thing? It was I know I modified the objects with some. It wasn't a tool. It might have been modifier.
Nah, because modifiers don't change the objects themselves, they just make them look different.
Yeah. What was it? This?
Because one
No.
of the fun things about it was you turn mirror on and it made it look like there was an extrusion on both sides, but there actually wasn't if you turn the modifier back off. So you lose like half your work.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Was it one of these? That doesn't seem likely. Did I just dissolve edges till they like fit together?
That's what I would think, is that you dissolve the faces of what's magnetically snapped.
Let's
You probably have to go in the object to see it then, camera view wise.
mm, copy paste, grab X, view, um, oh, yep, let's take a look. Uh, edges, X, all edges. Nope, maybe it's because these edges. No, how did I do that? Mm,
It's not selecting the two faces and dissolving.
No, there was no. It's definitely a modifier. Just can't remember which one. It was something about selecting the first one and then the second one, but not looking like it.
Was it maybe something in the right click menu
Mm,
with both of them
maybe.
selected? Because that's where a
Yeah.
lot of the merge stuff is.
Mm, I mean, you can parent things, but that's not it. Wait, what's this? Oh, gosh darn it. can't think of what it was.
Hmm. Maybe that'll have to be a later one
Yeah,
or a
I guess
video.
so. 'Cause I can't quite remember, unfortunately. I know it's something in modifiers where you would select the first object and then you select the second object and then it would absorb this. Yeah. Anyway,
Okay. Um, it's 40 after. Do we want to end it here, or do we want to try and talk about exporting the map?
exporting the map. You say,
Yes, the heat map, I believe, right?
oh yeah, yes, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yes, let's do that. Do that first. One moment. Um, one thing I'm going to try quick. Oh, so that did work. So, quick Google search reveals that, in fact, it's very simple. All you do is you hold the objects, then you press Control J for join. Yes, I'm definitely an expert. Definitely not. I said I know a few things, not that I know a lot of things. To be fair. And just like that, we can join all of those together. And now this is one object. But again, be very careful of that origin point. You can set origin to uh, different suggestions. You can set it to volume, and so then it will put itself there. Do as needed. You can also set origin to the 3D cursor. So if you have this at 0, 0, which you will if you copy this to a new file, you can set the origin point to the root or wherever you need it. Anyway, let's copy this, go into a new file, and we'll delete all of that. We're just interested in this. And because we're just interested in this, we'll send this to 0, 0. And that's a bit above the ground, but that's okay. I don't care too much. Now, when Isaac said the heat map, what he means is if we go into, I believe it is UV editing. Yes, yes it is. You'll notice we've got a bit of a different setup here. This window will maybe not be open immediately for you. Uh, there's a bit of window and view stuff that you can do to get here if it's not immediately open, but it should be here by default if you're under the UV editing tab. Now, um, you're going to want to select one of these vertices, and then if you press A, you will actually select the whole object. You'll see over here on the left that this suddenly lit up, and if we grab, if we switch our select to uh, faces, that's not the that's not the right one. That's the right one. There we go. You can see as I select these, you can see where they show up inside of here on the left, which is our view of all of the faces all at the same time. But this is not very conducive ordinarily to shading, coloring, and texturing your object. So what we can do is we can do this UV, and I believe it is unwrap. Uh, that didn't do anything, which means I'm doing something wrong. And I think I need to select smart. Maybe. maybe. And then this gives you a few options. Play around with it. I'm just going to move the island margin, see what happens. Nothing happened. Big surprise. I know. Try this again while selecting the that. Is that what I needed? Okay, that's a little too small, I think.
Hmm.
It's not quite what I'm looking for. Not today anyway. Yeah, we'll just that's similarly not good. Unwrap. Set this to 0. Shrink the margin. Shrink the angle. What happens? We get a whole bunch of faces, but they're
Tiny.
super tiny. Why is that? I didn't have this problem before, I swear.
Is it
Um,
maybe just the sheer amount of faces we have on this object is higher than the other ones?
it could be that is the problem, maybe.
Because if you look at those cubes, specifically, the amount of loop cuts we have in there is really making a lot of small rectangles.
That's true. It is not making this easy for us. Uh, so, yeah, I don't think that's getting bigger with much of the faces we do have at the moment. You could, um, well, you could do the what I would consider the smarter thing, um, and instead of doing this, you could manually select the shapes and the faces to move groups of them around, but as you can see, it stretches if it's connected to something. So we will just smart unwrap these like this. And if you highlight some of these, you will be able to see, oh, these are where these faces are, and therefore and so forth. I believe the reverse is not true, unfortunately, so you can't just highlight and then find it, which would be nice, but we don't
Yes.
live in a perfect world, unfortunately. So I mean, there could be an option for it. If you know, type it in the comments. Icicle, let me know and say, hey, you learn something new every day. This is what you're learning now. But once you have this as you want, then you go to, I believe it is, no, is it image? No, 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 is it just in UV? Yeah, yeah, it is. So you can export this UV layout to a file, and I realize that you can't see that file view, but it will generate a PNG for you, and you can use that in your software of choice. You can even use this in Paint. In fact, I have several times to ensure that I knew which faces I am coloring. But if you bring in a image from Paint and then you get into the texture and shading and rendering of the textured image, then you can pretty easily find, oh, this face belongs to this side of the pillar because it's green and yeah. It's the whole thing. Just know that you can use this as a template for figuring out where to place images or colors within your UV mapping. Um, yeah, it's kind of all there is to it as far as that goes.
All
And
right.
every one of these black dots is a face,
Every
even though there's
single one.
every single one. In fact, some of them are many.
Yeah. I remember when I tried to learn how to do UV maps, it was a lot harder because all I could find was the ones where they did it by hand, and I'm like, I can't possibly remember how to cut all these faces and take all that time to do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of you'll see these seam options. These allow you to select where does a face truly begin and where does it end? Like you saw those pillars doing earlier. And yeah, unwrap is not always the best because it does things like this, and that is that is very not the way we want things to go. Uh, so
Okay. Well, it's 10:02 now, so um thanks for doing this little Blender tutorial with me, Grady.
we finally got a good result.
Oh, for the auto? Oh yeah, that is
Yep,
a lot better.
UV just increase the angle limit, I guess. It would seem that does good work, I think. Yeah, if we
Yeah,
would
I
have
might worry about throwing, if your idea is to throw photo textures in,
yep,
if the angle
yep,
limit's too high, it looks like some of that might be a problem, but
yes. Yes, do be careful of that. And again, we've got a lot of unnecessary faces here from when I did loop cuts. So
sometimes it's
trying to
okay to deface your assets.
aha aha aha.
Yup.
Yeah. But it
Nice.
was really good time to come by and maybe tell a few people a few things they might or might not have known. Get started with Blender. Not too bad.
Yeah, it looks really nice. I know a lot of things are kind of hard for you to do up front when you first start learning Blender, and it's like I don't you don't really need to use all those very difficult sculpting tools and whatnot. You can do some really cool stuff with just the geometry of it, especially if you're
Yep.
going for games because you want less polygons. The icosphere.
Yep. I just wanted to show one last thing that I thought of real quick. Um, and give myself maybe a bunch of faces for this. Um, so if I go into edit mode, I grab a bunch of these. It's not important, but just wanted to show you. Um, I think it's to just no. Yeah, there is some stuff you can do if you use this proportional editing. And so if I wanted to move this bit of the sphere, specifically, I could have this protrude. And again, our directional axes controls work here. Um, but so all I'm doing here is I'm selecting a bunch of faces and I'm grabbing. But if I scroll up or down on my mouse, I can select progressively more of the object so that this actually becomes more egg shaped. And this has some admittedly limited uses, uh, but I just thought that would be something neat to show you all. Uh, you have a few different options for how it grabs, but yeah, just a little something. Otherwise, you will end up with this, and that is gross. We don't want that.
For people getting into 3D sculpting, I think Ecosphere is one of the ones I see the most of, where they'll take one and then adjust it to how high of a polygon count they want to start with, and then just um, add pinch and nudge it around on top of an ecosphere or an icosphere, just because it's got more faces than a cube, obviously, but then it's also just a little more editable than like a regular sphere. Don't you have a regular sphere in there too, or is it just the icosphere?
Just like goes through.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the sculpting. Wow. I'm I definitely sculpt in my spare time. Yes.
Yes, you definitely understand what all those pottery terms are on the side.
Yes, I most assuredly do. Do not be fooled by this. Well, honestly, it's starting to look like a little
Like the
bird.
Behelp from Berserk.
Oh, geez. Well, on that note,
Thanks, Grady. Um, Let me pull those things up here again. So if you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, remember to like and subscribe. And also comment any questions that you might have for Grady and I'll pass them along. Or if there's other shortcuts you think that we could add to the videos like this. Times are Tuesday 6 p.m. we do code. And Thursday 6 p.m. we do variable things like this. Having guests on and stuff help promote having just different parts of game development that I can't necessarily dive into. I'm more code heavy and probably code heavy and like UI, or not even UI, but 2D illustration type stuff. Uh, so it was really nice for you to be able to show these guys some 3D stuff.
yeah, yeah, anytime.
And then Saturday 10 a.m. we have our art usually, but this week it's actually going to be finishing up and recapping the um, short 3 video tutorial on the Brick Breaker. Um, with that, everybody have a bug-free day and have a good night.
Bye.
And